Hello, this is part 2 in Vedic Vargas versus Vibrational Astrology. And at the end of part 1, we were talking about Vargotama. Vargotama is a very special and wonderful thing according to Vedic astrology. It is when a planet is in the same sign in the Rashi sign and the Navamsa sign. So if the sign in the natal chart and the Navamsa chart is the same, it's considered to be very beautiful. And you can see why this makes sense, given what I said in part 1, that there is this beautiful tapestry, the sutras, the threads that are weaving all of this together, and it makes the fabric of our lives a whole, complete, healthy, integrated life, because the cosmos is not a lot of separate, disparate things. It is a fabric, and this is what the fabric is. So having the same sign shows where things are touching, and it's considered to be a special blessing in Vedic astrology. Well, where are these points where the Navamsa chart, which is a chart of healing and wholeness and what your path in life is, in Vedic astrology more related to your dharma, your path. In vibrational astrology, it's wholeness and healing. So it's connectedness. It's being a part of your environment. Your environment. So where are these points? They are at the 8 points every 45 degrees. So they are at the beginning of the cardinal signs. Actually, it's surrounding the beginning of the cardinal signs. Excuse me. So the end of Pisces and the beginning of Aries are Vargotama. End of Pisces is Pisces Navamsa. Beginning of Aries is Aries Navamsa. Same thing happens at the beginning of the next cardinal sign, Cancer. End of Gemini, beginning of Cancer. So these are sections of 6 degrees 40 minutes, because each zodiac sign is 3 degrees 20 minutes. So 2 of them together is 6 degrees 40 minutes. So end of Virgo, beginning of Libra, end of Sagittarius, beginning of Capricorn. Those cardinal points, so at the very end, last 3 degrees 20 minutes of the mutable signs, first 3 degrees 20 minutes of cardinal signs, have a very sweet feeling that helps them. So cardinal signs, indicate some kind of new change. We have this idea of the chakra. Chakra literally means wheel, the spinning wheel. When you get to those cardinal points, it indicates it's like a spoke in a wheel. It's a changing point. It's like a grease or oil that smooths it, that makes that transition a little easier, because the Navamsa sign is soft, and it integrates and it makes whole. And halfway between those cardinal points, which is 15 degrees of fixed. So 15 degrees of fixed signs are often looked at as a kind of like guardians of the zodiac, the fixed pillars halfway between the cardinal signs. And they are also Vargotama. Only 3 degrees 20 minutes. It's not 2 consecutive signs. It's a single sign. So here in the middle of Aquarius, middle of Taurus, and middle of Leo, and middle of Scorpio, roughly the middle, right in that area, you have the Vargotama. So there it is. It's an 8-fold path, as you might say in like a Buddhist tradition. I've drawn it in black lines, like a cross and then another cross. It's like the 8-fold path of change And it's like a blessing of the Divine Mother to ease you through those transition points. It's all about the cosmic tapestry, the sutras. This gives you a feeling for why the word sutra is so often used in the Vedic tradition. Why are these statements of wisdom called sutras, which are also threads? Well, yes, they are threads, but the whole idea of threads is so critically important because the cosmos also is woven together with threads. So you see the importance of sutras, threads, holding together, connecting throughout this understanding of astrology. Okay, so the Navamsa chart is, I've got here a phrase, Queen of the Vargas. I mean, it's the Varga that's most often used. If you go to a Vedic astrologer, I think most Vedic astrologers cannot even begin the interpretation without looking at the nakshatras and the Navamsa chart. They're so fundamental. And we see the sacred geometry used to describe the exquisite underlying geometry of life. Okay, so I'm showing you ideas in Vedic astrology, perhaps from a different perspective than you've heard before, and how they are very similar. So here we're seeing a lot of similarities in the way of thinking in vibrational astrology and Vedic astrology. And also, these kinds of patterns and connecting points occur in many ways. The saptamsa signs do it very beautifully. The places where the saptamsa sign and the Rasi sign are the same are also beautiful spots. I don't see as much emphasis on this as Vargotama, which is where the Navamsa sign and the Rasi sign are the same. But where the saptamsa sign and the Rasi sign are the same is very interesting. It forms what we can call a Star of David. It's every 60 degrees. So instead of every 45 degrees, it's every 60 degrees. So you get this nice, smooth point. So a Star of David is formed by the points where the saptamsa sign and the Rasi sign are the same. And again, the idea is that where the signs are the same is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing because it's creating a resonance, a perfect resonance. It's like a tunnel. You know, you could think it's like a wormhole or something. It's like a tunnel. It's like a window. That's probably a better analogy. A window. You know, if you're in a house or a room with no windows, you feel locked in. It's like a window. Just transport straight through from the Rasi right to the saptamsa. No modification, no adjustments, just whoop, right through, straight connection. And these were all 6 degrees 40 minutes in this case. All of them. So you get this beautiful Star of David formed by where the saptamsa sign and the Rasi sign are the same. Okay, I also have a note here. Odd-numbered signs begin with their own sign, and even-numbered signs begin with the opposite sign. You get this beautiful rhythm that goes on very often. So Aries begins with Aries, Navamsa. Taurus Rasi begins with Scorpio, the opposite sign. So the even-numbered Rasi signs begin with the opposite saptamsa sign. Then you get back to Gemini, and odd-numbered sign, it starts with Gemini. You get to Cancer, it starts with the opposite sign of Capricorn. So the even-numbered signs have a polarity, and the odd-numbered signs lack the polarity. They're just simple and straightforward. So the even-numbered signs have more awareness of duality and other. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And the odd-numbered signs, the fire and air signs, they just kind of go without as much awareness of what they're interacting with. So this is part of the cosmic tapestry. So what I'm showing here is some of the philosophy, some of the way of thinking behind some of the traditions and heritages in Vedic astrology. And we can see how this in a way enriches our appreciation of vibrational astrology. Maybe it doesn't help us with specific interpretations, or maybe it will, but I think it enriches our appreciation at a minimum, and possibly open doors to better understanding of how to interpret additional things that we're overlooking. So some summary points that I've made in this first part of discussing basic concepts is that Vargas can be viewed as subsigns of the Rasi signs, or subsections of the whole zodiac. And when the point number 2 is important. If the subsigns go in the order of the zodiac and they have the same sign, it is what is called in Western astrology a harmonic chart. Let me go back and show you. With the SubTomson chart, just like the Navamsa chart, it goes right through the zodiac. Aries, we go through 7 signs. When we reach the end of Aries Rasi sign, so we get up to Libra, and then you just continue. Just go to Scorpio and right on through. When you get to Pisces, start over with Aries again. So you end up with 7 zodiacs, and you end up with 7 saptamsa signs within each Rasi sign. It's extremely simple. Let me say it again, because we're going to find out there are other Vargas that do not do this. And those are the Vargas that are not vibrational charts. They are different from what we use in modern Western astrology. The ones that are the same, the Vargas that are the same as the vibrational charts, are the ones like the SubTomson and the Navamsa, where 2 things have to be happening. Number 1, every sign is the same size. And number 2, they just go right around the zodiac. Aries to Pisces, Aries to Pisces, Aries to Pisces. Now we're going to start looking at some Vargas that do not work that way. They either have, typically what happens is they do not go in zodiac order, and in some cases all the signs are not the same size. Now, these Vargas that are not vibrational charts, excuse me, these Vargas that are not vibrational charts, maybe they're important. Maybe there's more going on in the sky than the vibrational charts that we currently know about in vibrational astrology. Okay? So the SubTomson and the Navamsa chart that are used in Vedic astrology, exactly the same as what we use in vibrational astrology. We use tropical zodiac, they use sidereal zodiac, but all the angular distances are the same, and primarily we're looking at angular distances. So it's essentially the same. Calculations are the same. All the angles between the angular distances between the planets are the same in a SubTomson chart and a 7th harmonic chart. Same thing with Navamsa and 9th harmonic chart. But we're going to see there are other kinds of Vargas, and maybe they're also important, and we just have not incorporated them yet into vibrational astrology. Maybe they are, maybe they are not. And that's one of the ideas in vibrational astrology, is we question everything. You know, it can be in a great holy book, wonderful. That makes us open and receptive and maybe anticipate that it could be right, but we don't assume anything. That's a modern approach. We have to test, we have to evaluate. We don't just believe it because it's in a book. We have to experience it. Okay, now, let's see, we're 15 minutes into this, so let's start our next section. Let's look at some of the history behind Vargas, and there have been changes. So a lot of times when you learn Vedic astrology, they teach you what we currently understand. But 1,000 years ago, or 1,500 years ago, or even 500 years ago, there may have been some other ideas, or I'll say there were some other ideas about some of the Vargas, how they're even calculated and how they're interpreted. So what we get in Vedic astrology is the same thing we get in all forms of astrology, different ideas, different points of view. It is not a singular monolithic structure. One way is the only way. There are lots of variations. And let's look at it, because how do we know that the one we have today is the best? Maybe there's a variation from the ancient literature that works better, or also works, or is the right one. Who knows? So let's look at it. In any case, it's fascinating to learn some of the roots of what we're doing today and how people 1,000 years ago were doing something extremely similar to what we're doing today. And this is one of the misunderstandings you'll often hear from modern Western astrologers, is that this harmonic astrology and vibrational astrology is so different, so new. No, it's not that new and different. It's a different heritage of ideas with ancient roots. Okay. In the West as well as in the East. Okay. Even Ptolemy wrote a book on harmonics and related it to the sky. So anyway, let's look at some of the different calculations here. Hora. Hora, I've already mentioned, it's, you could say, the simplest of the Vargas, in that you take each sign. Now, I've taken this from a website, roccoritnicaastrologer.com. So he has these on his website and just beautifully done, so I didn't see a reason to change it. And what's shown on the left is the typical Hora calculation. And the idea today, like if you go to a Vedic astrologer, a modern Vedic astrologer, the idea is that if a planet is in the first half of a masculine sign, in other words, air or fire, then it's solar. Intuitively makes sense, right? So if you're in the first half of Aries, Gemini, Leo, it's solar, it's sun. And if you're in the second half of a masculine sign, it's lunar. So second half of Aries, Gemini, Leo, and so on are lunar. And just the opposite for the feminine signs. The earth and water, their first half is moon and the second half is sun. So you get this nice, beautiful pattern, very simple, where each luminary, the sun, covers 30 degrees and the moon covers 30 degrees, like that. So it's a nice, simple pattern. It intuitively is appealing, it makes sense, and you can get the feeling that this is probably the way it's always been done. You know, I've studied Vedic astrology a long time ago, and I thought, oh, that's how the Hora chart is done. And then decades later, I find out that some of the ancient Vedic books have descriptions that are different. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought this is how it is. And I find out, well, no, there's been different ideas. And the Yajna Jataka, which is an important book, and the Brihat Jataka, these are two ancient important books in Vedic astrology tradition. They describe, I think one or both of these also describes this. Sometimes they describe different methods in different parts of the book, but they definitely describe where the first half of Aries is Aries. Okay, so far so good. And then you jump back 2 signs. Whoa, to Aquarius. Then you get to Taurus, and you're back, starting with Taurus, and then you go back 2 signs earlier, Pisces. And then you jump forward to the sign again, and then back 2 signs. So it's an interesting rhythm. What happens is you go back 2 signs, and then you jump forward 3 signs, which brings you to start at the same sign. So you go forward 2, back 3, forward, back 2, forward 3. So you go back 2, forward 3, back 2, forward 3. So Aries, back to Aquarius, forward 3 to Taurus, back 2 to Pisces, forward 3 to Gemini. And you get this kind of nice kind of rhythm. It's kind of interesting. You go back 2, forward 3. So you go back a little bit and then you jump a little bit more forward. It's a very interesting rhythm that's set up. So if you have a planet in the second half of Gemini, does that planet pick up a lunar feeling from this system, or does it pick up an Aries feeling? Totally different, right? Very different. This one, by the way, is, planets, and this one is sign emphasis. So, and this one, is obviously a little more intricate. You're going through all the different signs here, whereas here it's just sun and moon. It's just interesting. And in terms of vibrational astrology today, these are just ancient ideas that, it's nice to know about them. You never know when you will hit gold. You never know when you're exploring something and a door opens, or maybe you just try it out and for some reason it works. Maybe we can find, people in certain professions or certain behaviors, we'll have planets in certain Hora signs. We don't know. It can be researched, it can be thought about. Anyway, it's nice to know. I don't know what to do with it right now, okay? I always like the simple system I was taught, but this one's intriguing. I'm just sharing with you, you might say, the facts, the truth of what's going on with Vedic Vargas. Sometimes there's a tendency for people to simplify and just teach their system. That's fine to, apprentice under somebody and learn their system. But here I'm just sharing the background, the story, the variations of what's really going on. And one thing that this tells me about vibrational astrology is that it's not so unusual to play with the rules. It's not like Vedic astrology is one simple set of instructions, like this is the manual, this is how it is. There are variations. So it's not that radical and unusual for vibrational astrology to introduce some other variations. It makes me feel not so different and more a part of the Vedic tradition, if that makes any sense. Anyway, it's just good to know how things actually work. So here's some quotes to kind of illustrate or demonstrate that this is really true. I'm not making this up. Here's a quote from the Yavana Jataka. The sun rules the first hora in the odd signs, and the second in the even. The moon rules the rest. Well, that's the modern rule. It's in the Yavana Jataka, chapter 28, verse 4, and it's also given in the BPHS, the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, where the BPHS has in recent years become probably the most important reference book for many Vedic astrologers. It wasn't always, but nowadays it tends to be a big one. And then what appears to be a contradiction, we have in the Yavana Jataka, the first hora in a sign belongs to the Lord of the sign, the second to the Lord of the 11th sign from it. I called it going back to, or same as going forward 11, in chapter 1, verse 39. And this method of calculating is also mentioned in the Brihat Jataka. So you see both methods described. Just interesting. Okay, now, this is interesting. And maybe a little more, upsetting, I guess, is that, okay, Hora chart has two different calculations. A lot of us don't rely on the Hora chart a whole lot, but we do rely on the SubTomson chart. It's one of the most basic and fundamental in Vedic astrology and in vibrational astrology. It's really, really a basic, important Varga. And this really surprised me. In a lot of the ancient texts, they describe an alternative way of laying out the signs. So this is what I showed you before, and it's the way we do it in vibrational astrology. We go Aries through Pisces, start over again Aries through Pisces, and we get, this diagram. I always thought that was the way it was done. Now I find out that in the Yavana Jataka, they have a different way of calculating the SubTomson chart. And because it's not Aries through Pisces and then Aries through Pisces again, it's not what we would consider to be a vibrational chart. It's some other kind of thing that maybe is also important. I don't know. It could be. But here it is. And the idea is that we have seven. We're working on seven. We have 7 sections in each sign. And interestingly, there are 7 planets. When we call sun and moon planets. And we leave Uranus and Neptune, Pluto out. We have Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, 7. There's almost a temptation here to take the 7, we'll call them planets. And of course, in Vedic astrology, they often add Rahu and Ketu, the North Node and South Node, and get 9. But if you use those 7, you could stick the 7 planets in each Rasi sign and stick planets instead of signs in there. And that's exactly what they did. The 7 planets are assigned to each of the 7 saptamsa signs within a Rasi zodiac sign, starting with the planet that rules the zodiac sign. So Mars, let's go over here to Aries. Mars rules Aries, and then it goes Mars, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, and then Venus rules Taurus, so Taurus starts with Venus, and so on. And it goes through some particular order of the planets. You can analyze this order of the planets. I have not analyzed it carefully or thought about it that much. You can if you want to, and probably some other astrologers have. But the basic idea is that we're not going Aries through Pisces around. In fact, we're not using zodiac signs at all. So the first, it's a little more than 4 degrees, I think it's about 4 degrees 17 minutes, of Aries is Mars flavor to it. And using the usual thing, that would agree. We would say Aries. Next would be Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo. But this one we would say is Virgo, and it's got Jupiter. And here we would have Libra, and it says Saturn. So you're going to get some big differences for some of these sections. The bottom line is that if you have a planet at the end of Aries, in the last few degrees of Aries, is it picking up a Saturn quality, or is it picking up a Libra quality, the 7th sign, right? Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. Which one is it? We have 2 different calculations here. Okay, so it's just fun to know historically what was done and what some of the options are and what's going on. And we do see this diversity of opinions in the ancient tradition. Let's look at another one, the D12, the Dwadasamsa, also used in Western astrology. And the Dwadasamsa also does not go straight around the zodiac. The 12 signs go in the Rasi sign Aries, Aries to Pisces, and then you jump a sign. You skip over Aries and go to Taurus. And you go Taurus through the 12 signs, you end up with Aries. You skip over Taurus and you jump to Gemini. So at each division of the Rasi sign, each time you change Rasi sign, the Dwadasamsa sign jumps a sign. So that is not a vibrational chart. A vibrational chart always goes Aries to Pisces, Aries to Pisces, Aries to Pisces. This is some other kind of chart that may be valid, it may be important, it may be extremely important. We don't know everything in vibrational astrology. But that's why the D12 chart is not a 12 vibration chart. And from the point of view of Western harmonic astrology, it is not 12th harmonic. But in Vedic astrology, if you want to call it 12th harmonic, you can. So, but in modern Western astrology, it's not 12th harmonic. So is that clear? I think it is. I think I've said this stuff over and over again enough that I hope that's very simple and very clear. So these are other ways of dividing the circle into sub-signs, and there's nothing that makes you have to go Aries through Pisces and then Aries through Pisces again. Why not? You can jump a sign, as is done here, and start each sign. Each Dwadasam, each Rasi sign begins with the same Dwadasamsa sign. That's a common idea in modern Western astrology, and here we see it's in Vedic astrology as well. So here, the tradition of Western astrology is the same as Vedic, and the vibrational is different, because in vibrational, we don't have this idea of jumping signs. Why don't we have it? Because vibrational astrology is very data-driven. We haven't done the research to confirm it, and we use a very simple idea of waves, and waves don't suddenly jump. They just go continuously. So we have not incorporated this idea yet. Maybe someday we will. Maybe we never will. We can do an extreme case sampling study and see if it works consistently. But this is to explain to you how Vargas have some similarities and some differences from vibrational astrology and harmonic astrology as practiced in the West. How there's some differences and some similarities. So the D12 chart, Dwadasamsa chart, is not a vibrational chart. It might be important. We haven't incorporated it yet. Okay. Now, let me share this with you, and then we'll stop. This is a good stopping point. We're at a little over a half hour, and this is a good place to stop. Because this is so closely related to the Dwadasamsa. This is a variation of the Dwadasamsa, actually. Where instead of dividing each sign into 12 pieces, you divide it into 13 pieces. And then this is a vibrational chart. So what we see here is 13 signs. Aries, Rasi, Aries begins with Aries, goes 13 signs, which means it ends with Aries, and then Taurus begins with Taurus without having to jump a sign. So if you put 13 signs in each Rasi sign, you'll get a perfectly continuous sequence of zodiac signs, perfectly continuous. You'll get 13 zodiacs, and this is the 13 vibration chart. And this 13 vibration chart that we use today in vibrational astrology, we use it all the time. We think it's very important. We're going to see in a later video in this series, it shows up in the charts of gurus. I've made other videos. Shows up in the charts of mafia leaders. This 13 vibration is very, very powerful and important. And I have not found it in Vedic astrology yet. If any of you are Vedic astrology experts and you know of it being used in Vedic astrology, you can share that with us. But it was used in Babylonia. It was used in Babylonia. So it was a system used in Babylonia. It's now referred to as the Dodecatemoria. How's that for a mouthful? The Dodecatemoria. Dodecatemoria is sometimes also the same as Dwadasamsa. Well, anyway, but in this context, it's also described as this method. So sometimes you hear the same word used for different calculations. And they even give a way to calculate it in these ancient texts from Babylonia, which is a kind of a fast way, if you don't have computers and electronic calculators, they give a fast way to calculate it. The the Dodecatemoria sign. This Dodecatemoria, just to make this clear, is a harmonic chart. It is the 13th harmonic chart, what I also call a vibrational chart. This term vibrational chart ends up being useful in this context because vibrational chart has only one meaning. Harmonic chart can mean the same as vibrational chart, but it's also used in Vedic astrology to mean Varga. So the word harmonic chart is ambiguous. Vedic chart is not, Varga is not ambiguous. And divisional chart is not ambiguous. Divisional chart is the same as Varga. So this is interesting. From page 157 in a book called In the Path of the Moon, Babylonian Celestial Divination and Its Legacy by Francesca Rochberg. She's a fantastic historian of astrology. The position where n is the number of degrees of the planet in a zodiac sign is 12n plus n in the zodiac sign. It's a formula that calculates the 13th harmonic sign. So how to calculate the 13th harmonic sign? It's a formula that can be used. The simple formula we use with computers is you just multiply every planetary position by the number you're interested in this case 13. You convert the zodiac position to 360 degree notation, you multiply by 13 if you want 13 vibration, and you have it. It's just, every harmonic chart's calculated the same way. But they give this clever way to calculate it without computers and calculators way back in the ancient Babylonian literature. Excuse me. So what we're seeing here, let's think about this. What we're seeing here is that many of the ideas in vibrational astrology are in ancient Vedic astrology and they're in ancient Babylonian astrology. And these ideas are getting transmitted and shared across different cultures. So we see the Dodecatemoria, as far as I know, not getting picked up and used in Vedic astrology, but it is consistent with modern vibrational astrology. It is the 13th harmonic chart, period. That's simple. Okay, so let's stop here, and I'm going to pick up with this slide in part 3. And this is very, very fascinating. We'll pick up with this in part 3. We are now at 37 minutes, my friends. Thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.